Welcome to the Gonzo Chronicles. I'm your host, Cyrus Alderwood, the official spokesman for Generation X. Stick around. It's going to get weird, as always.
This is not live, right?
Hey, welcome back to the Gonzo Chronicles. This is your host, Cyrus Alderwood. And tonight we're going to talk about something really fun. We're going back in time. Because I went back in time last week. The guest we have on tonight, Rob Mahoney, also known as God's Gift to Women, and the inventor of the carburetor, from what I read on Wikipedia. Hey, Rob, thanks for coming on to the show, buddy. How you doing tonight?
Good, Cyrus. How are you?
Just living the dream, having a cold one, you know. Anything we can do to get by. It's Thanksgiving week for anybody listening. Today's November 21st. We're about a couple days away from Thanksgiving. Rob, you ready? What do you got? What are your plans this week?
I get to get off from work, which is good. Because last year I worked during Thanksgiving, and it kind of sucked. But I'm going to be here at my house with my family, and we got some people coming over. So, we're just arranging the refrigerator so everything can fit. And the craziness of Thanksgiving, getting everything prepared is the hardest part.
Yeah, that is, man. It's thankfully we're not doing this here where I live. Where I'm going to my sister's, and we're probably going to have 20 plus people there, I think, this year, and 3 dogs. So hey, I'm looking forward to really hanging out with dogs. I'm not kidding. Like, those are my little buddies. But no, it should be a good time, man. I'm looking forward to breaking God's law with that whole gluttony thing. Which that's a weekly occurrence these days. But no, it should be a good time, man. So hopefully everybody that's listening has a great Thanksgiving, and hopefully you're getting together with friends, family, and have a good time, man. It's this is one of my favorite times of year. Really, I really just like the meaning behind. I think every day should be Thanksgiving in a way, because just being grateful for all the good stuff we have. And hell, Rob, we're born in America, so we won the lottery right there.
Yep. No, I go with your sentiment about being thankful for every day we have, because when you're younger you don't realize what a great gift that we have, and then when you start getting older and start your body starts telling you, hey, you need to start slowing down. That's when you kind of reflect on everything that has happened to you in life, whether it's been good or bad. But you've always been around friends and family, and there's no greater gift than being around that.
And I guess as far as the entertainment world, I'm still grateful that Keith Richards and Ric Flair have not drank themselves to death yet, and we still get another year of Rolling Stones and the Nature Boys. That's good times, man. Good times.
Yeah.
Hey, so tonight, Rob,
what you talk about. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was gonna just say, reflecting on like people like Keith Richards and Ric Flair, it's amazing that they've been so great to us all these years, like the memories. And like when I get like sad about things, I reflect on my memories the most. And like I said earlier, there's been good times and bad times, but I always these days I try to always focus on the good things in life. And every day I look out and sad and I say, God, like this is the greatest thing ever, because like my mom, God bless her heart, she's sick right now, but she keeps fighting, and I have my health issues too, but that inspires me to keep fighting, to keep this great God's gift to us about being here and being with friends and being with family. So everybody listening, I hope you guys have a happy Thanksgiving, and I guess we can go on with the show now.
Yeah, and before I get into some dumbass rant, Rob, I started something. This was last year. I was reading this book, and it really sort of changed my outlook on things. And I got it. So at that point, I decided I took this 30-day challenge. I was going to get up every day, and I was going to write down 10 things I was grateful for. Not that I was thankful for, but grateful. There's a bit of a difference there, and that just carried on, like to me today, even a year later. I mean, I went way past that challenge. When I wake up in the morning and I come through here and I grab a cup of cappuccino or whatever, I look outside. I like literally every morning. I think about 5 things that I'm grateful for. It could be even like the littlest things, like my nephew's gonna be a father next month, so I'm grateful if this little baby's healthy, or whatever, just anything. And when you start your day off that way, it's really hard for anybody to f your day when you're already going into the day with a grateful heart and grateful spirit. So that's so anybody listening, man, I certainly encourage that. Rob, I got to run something by you, brother. Hear me out. This may be the dumbest thing you hear all week. This really might be the dumbest.
Well,
I love Star.
This is not the tits again, is it?
No, we're not talking about tits tonight. But so I love Star Wars. I really do. I love like all things Star Wars. As a matter of fact, Star Wars was my first movie when I was 3 years old. I vaguely remember being there, but I know that was the first movie I ever saw at the theater. And I watched all the stuff on Disney, the Obi-Wans and all the movie spinoffs, and every trilogy that comes out. And I got to tell you, man, a lot of people, one of their favorite movies is Revenge of the Sith because of just the lightsaber duels themselves, especially Obi-Wan and Anakin, right? When Anakin turned into Vader. So that was just a crazy badass scene. And I'll admit, that was a heck of a fight. Anakin was quite confident. Obi-Wan was lucky he was the one that did the backflip first and got the high ground. And he hacked off 3 of Anakin's limbs and lit him on fire. But I started to think about this. He could have saved the galaxy a lot of trouble if he'd have just went down there and finished the job. Anakin was already missing an arm and 2 legs. What's he going to do? He's on fire. He's already mad at you. He hates you. He's too busy trying to put the fire out to use the Force on him. So why didn't he just go down there and do that? No, he has to run. And Yoda, as bad as we thought he was, gets beat up by Palpatine, and who we've never seen lightsaber duel till then. So just when the galaxy needs them the most, these 2 people, Yoda and Obi-Wan, these so-called tough guy heroes, they cut tail and run. They go hide. Anakin, Obi-Wan goes and hides for 10 years, afraid of Vader because he knows Vader's looking for him. Terrified, that Obi-Wan series. And I'm thinking, dude, he went 10 years afraid of a man that's afraid of a one-legged man that smells like bacon. Really, that's the best Obi-Wan can do for the next 10 years after that fight. And then Yoda living there in the swamp, and I thought, I was thinking back to that scene when he hacked off his legs, standing there. What would John Wayne have done? No, we know what the Duke would have done.
John Wayne would have walked in.
What would Clint Eastwood have done? Clint Eastwood would have walked down there and lit his cigar on him and stole his boots. That's what Clint Eastwood had done. But no, these 2 guys. So the more I think of Obi-Wan and Yoda, maybe I'm just getting salty in my older years, but now I'm thinking they're a couple of deserters. I'm glad Luke and Leia had some balls. There was only 5 of them left. They still went and fought the Empire.
True. I mean, I used to chalk it up to the fact that like all the Jedi were killed in Sith except for Obi-Wan and Yoda. So I was thinking it was more of that, like let's try to regroup and like build for the future instead of tuck tail and run. But it's a valid point. Like if they wanted to start a new Jedi army they could have done it right away instead of waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. So yeah, I get your point about they are a couple of deserters in a way. I think they should have probably finished. Obviously finished Anakin, but Palpatine really did get away. So he's already planning for the future. Palpatine is always on top of his game when it comes to game plans, and I think that maybe Obi-Wan and Yoda just kind of were like, what's the old saying, sitting in the breeze, like kind of just chilling and not really planning for the future until Luke came along, obviously, and then, oh hey, let's get back in the game now. It's like, Obi, you're like 3,000 years old now, like you can't help us. Yeah, you can't help us. Like you can help train me, but like you're not really a help in a fight. And we kind of find that a little different because Obi knew once he was destroyed, then he would actually become more powerful because he could actually still communicate but no, I get your point.
Yeah, I was just thinking if you had to put like Yoda and Obi-Wan, and then John Wayne and Clint Eastwood, we know who the pussies are out of that.
Yeah,
and that's all I'm saying. Could be wrong, but I'm still gonna watch. I'm gonna watch those every time they come on because they're binge worthy. But Star Wars came out in 1977, but the other two movies came out in the 80s: Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And tonight we're going to be talking about not big blockbuster films, but we do film reviews on your show, Rob. So we're going to do one here tonight, and we're going to talk about some of the most underrated movies of the 80s and 90s. And that's a big difference. There's I looked this up. I just pulled this up when we started to Zoom here. I want to run down the top 10 the highest grossing films of the 80s. And all these underrated movies kind of like lived in their shadows. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom came in at number 10. Rain Man came in at number 9. I was surprised about that one. Top Gun came in at number 8. This one we just reviewed, Back to the Future, came in at number 7.
Yeah.
Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark came in at 6. By the way, that was the best out of the trilogy, of the franchise, I think.
Quickly though, that was my first movie I went to see at the theater, was Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Man, does that ever get old to you? I mean, can you still watch that to this day all the time?
I can still watch it. And what's funny, we were just talking about Star Wars, and both of them have the one common, Harrison Ford. So, but to me, Raiders of the Lost Ark is Harrison Ford's crowning achievement. I will stand by that.
You know what? I think you're right. That may be my favorite Harrison Ford movie.
Yeah.
Guess what came in at number 5? This one shocked me too. But you remember Batman from 1989?
Yep, and I love Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton is my favorite Batman. I'm going to stand by that too.
Let's go back to Harrison Ford at number 4, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. That was from 1989.
That beat the other two. Wow.
Yeah, but I'm not surprised that all 3 of those made the top 10. Star Wars Return of the Jedi came in at number 3. Empire Strikes Back came in at number 2. Can you guess what the number 1 movie of the decade was in the gross receipts at the box office?
I'll say E.T.
You're right. You nailed it.
I saw E.T. with my dad. Like my dad wasn't much of a moviegoer, but that refreshed my memory. That came out in '84, right?
It came out in '82.
Okay, so I was 11 years old. 11-year-old Father Mahoney, and I kept begging my dad. I'm like, "Well, we need to go see this. We need to go see this." Finally, like he gave, because my father had visitation rights, so I went to visit him, and we ended up seeing the movie at the theater across the street, ironically. And I love that movie. Like,
that year, it looks like it made $792 million.
Wow,
that's a lot of. That's for 1982. That's a chunk, man.
That is.
Oh, here's a little interesting tidbit about. I loved that movie. That was one of my first ones too. When I was a kid, I loved. I made my mom and dad take me 2 or 3 times to see that. Harrison Ford actually was in E.T. in the original version, but he had a real small role, and they cut it. He got removed, so they removed it from the movie. It was just like a little cameo. but they figured
Wow.
anything from him would help at the box office. But Spielberg decided to go ahead and remove it, and but that was, I mean, probably a good call. You didn't need him to overshadow some of the other actors, because he
Yeah.
was coming off of Empire um, and Star
You
Wars, and of course, Indiana Jones. But yeah. But anyway,
was
that was a little fun,
so
fun
refresh my
fact.
memory that little list you put, the top 10 of grossing films. Harrison Ford was in 5 of them then, right?
Yeah, if you not include ET, he was in, let's see, see, the 2 Star Wars, Jedi and Empire, and then the
All
3
three. Yeah.
Indiana Jones. So he was in 5 of those movies. So that, I mean,
Wow.
that just tells you how big of a star he was in that era.
And talk about underrated. A lot of people, when they talk about actors, don't usually bring up Harrison Ford, but there's the proof right there.
Yeah, and
There's the
he has
proof.
such a. It's not just the action films. This guy's got such a wide range. We've seen like Regarding Henry and all
Yeah.
these others. Now, as big as Tom Cruise was in the '80s, he was only in 2 of those.
I liked
You know,
Witness too. Witness was good.
Witness, that very underrated movie, wasn't it?
Yes.
So these underrated movies, they sort of live in the shadows of these top grossing films, and I think the '80s. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Rob, but I think the '80s probably was there. Hollywood's always been big, but I think in the '80s it changed a little bit because they were always looking for that summer blockbuster, these big,
Yeah.
huge hits, like especially hitting the teen and young adult audience, like we were talking about the Lost Boys, we talked about Top Gun, the Goonies, Ferris Bueller, Breakfast Club. There's these big iconic films of the
Yeah.
'80s. There are a lot of really good ones that did okay, but like very underrated, and they sort of lived in the shadows of the rest of this. When it comes to the '80s, what do you what are some of the ones you have on your list of underrated films?
Well, I have a list of my top 10, not necessarily in order, but I also have like a couple of ones that just missed the list. So a couple of
Well,
days ago, I was going through my Roku and I came across Adventures in Babysitting, and I
oh,
forgot how good that movie was.
that was a
Like
great film.
yeah, it's a cheesy film, yes. Is it a little contrived? Yes. But man, I just kept smiling through that whole movie because that we talked about memories earlier before the movies, and man, that brought back some great memories of like the innocence of my childhood and everything, and having a babysitter because I wasn't always an adult version of me. I had babysitters in the past, and I remember a conversation I had with one of my babysitters after this came out, and I thought to myself, like, man, why can't I have that kind of adventure here?
Yeah. In the same vein of that movie, that was such a good movie with Elizabeth Shue. But do you remember
Yeah.
License to Drive? It had the two Corey, or one of the Coreys in it. Corey Haim.
Oh, I think it was. I would think it was both Corys. It was
Oh,
both
maybe it
Corys.
was. But that was sort of in
Yeah.
the same vein of that. And then there was another where Corey Haim was, no, it wasn't Corey Haim at all. Like Father, Like Son. There was a slew of movies that came out around about the same time that were sort of like that. Do you remember those? Hey, I think Rob froze up on me. Hey, there you are, Rob. Oh,
Yeah. No, the screen went black for a second.
okay. Did you hear what I was saying though?
Yeah, about like father, like son.
Yeah, I'm gonna tee that up to you, and I'm gonna grab a fresh beer. I'll be right back in about 2 seconds.
All right.
Go ahead, man.
While Cyrus is gone, let's just talk about the innocence of times back then. When you watch these '80s movies, and we'll talk about '90s too, but like when you watch these '80s movies, if you grew up during that time, it wasn't just about the movies. It was about the music. It was about the style. It was about the innocence of your youth. I mean, I I want everybody who's listening to close their eyes for 1 second and think about something that made you happy during the '80s. I guarantee after you think about this, you'll be smiling about like the memory that you just came out with, because I do that a lot. When I'm sad, I think about reflections and I think about something that made me happy once in my life, and I always go back to the '80s.
Yeah, that was such a gosh, it was such a good time. It's like when in that
Yeah.
like father like son when he finally got brave enough there at the end to punch the kid that was the bully. As soon as his fist hit his jaw,
Yeah.
you remember the song that cranked up, "Wild Side" by Motley Crue.
Yeah.
So it was the soundtracks were
Dun, dun,
big.
dun, dun.
Yeah, soundtracks are big. The commercials are big. The merchandise was big. And the '80s, people didn't just accessorize; they accessorized with the EXS, like accessory, like excessive.
Yeah.
You know? And so
Well,
it's all about fashion
we
too.
talked about we talked about the hair bands once on the show before, and that was me. Like I wanted to be one of those rockers. I wanted to be one of the hair rockers, long hair, glitzy style. All the girls are after you. Like that to me, that was like that would have been heaven if I could ever pulled off a hairstyle look.
Oh
So
yeah,
I mean that's the '80s for you.
one of my underrated films. I've got about 10 or 12 here, but one of my underrated films. Batman came in at number 5. It had Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton was in a really good movie. It was a very serious role, but it was way underrated. It's called Clean and Sober. Do you remember this one?
Yes,
He was a
I do
drug.
remember that one.
He's a drug addict, alcoholic. Um, Life fell apart. It was about him trying to get clean and then falling off the wagon, get clean, falling off the wagon. And what kind of an asshole jerk this guy was, but he really wasn't at heart. And it was
Yeah.
like he had to get all that off him. That was like one of the most, I think, my first really serious movie because a lot of drug use started to accelerate in the '80s, especially hard drugs, cocaine,
Yeah.
heroin, crack. And there were some movies that actually addressed that. Another underrated one that I didn't have on my list, but was um, Bright Lights, Big City. We mentioned this on your show with Michael Keaton,
Yeah.
also, and Less Than Zero. I don't remember that
Good.
Jamie Gertz.
Good movie.
And it done a lot with Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man, right? So Iron Man was in this, and it had a lot to do with just those times. But the music again, it's all about the fashion and the music that really just hung on to the movie and what it was about, like a perfect accessory. And I think that's missing.
Well, I think one of the most underrated songs, if you want to talk about songs for 1 second, is in that Less Than Zero, "Hazy Shade of Winter" by the Bangles. Because the Bangles were known as like more dance, but that was kind of like a more darker side of the Bangles.
Yeah, they were fun pop. Yeah, walk like an Egyptian.
To me, like that was that crowning achievement. That song set the tone for that movie.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and you talk about Robert Downey Jr. Another great, like so many movies had Robert Downey Jr. back then, and a lot of them he was more of a background player. Like Back to School, he was a background player, but every time he came on the screen, like he delivered like no one else could.
Yeah,
and that movie showed how good of an actor he was.
And in real life, he had the monkey on his back too with drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
For quite a while,
true,
and he had to bow out of Hollywood for a little while, get clean. And then when he came back, he roared back, his comeback in the 2000s, which I thought was an amazing achievement of his, because I'm thankful that he wasn't another one of those Hollywood, heroes of ours growing up that died, because we saw a few of them that just they partied themselves to damn death, and it's sad to see, but I'm glad, like, because River Phoenix, remember him? He was a big star in the '80s, and just that's for anybody that doesn't know River Phoenix. That's Joaquin Phoenix's big brother, actually.
Yeah.
So he was.
Well, can I use that as a segue to my next pick then?
Absolutely. As I open a cold.
Stand By Me.
Love that movie.
Stand By Me. To this day is the best coming of age movie ever.
Yeah,
I'm going to stand by that too, because such great performances all around. But man, of them all, River Phoenix was dynamic.
Yeah,
like absolutely dynamic in that movie.
Yeah, and
like he had that bad boy. Yeah, he had that bad boy like personality, but he had a heart of gold, and he showed both through the whole movie. And of course, the monologue towards the end about how he died, that is something like his character definitely would have done.
Trying to
And
stop
he
a
ended up
fight.
dying for trying to stop a fight. Yeah. So to me, like every time I watch Stand By Me, and I probably watch it at least once a year, easy. I cry every single time when I find out what happens to his character, because he has so much potential and he has so much heart that he died because of that heart, really.
Yeah. Can I tell you a personal story? And I don't know if I've told this on the show before, but that movie has such a
Sure.
very personal impact to me. My big sister, uh, she listens to the show sometimes. I don't know if she listens to this, but her name's Tammy. And when Tammy and I were growing up, we really loved that movie. And when that song came out again in the 80's, we kind of like, that was just sort of like our song, me and my sister.
Yeah.
And when she got married, she went on her honeymoon to, I guess, New Orleans. And the in-laws lived down there. So she ended up, they ended up moving. And there's my big sister. Like, I see her every day. She just disappeared, right? I
Yeah.
missed my sister terribly. Now, this is kind of goes back to when I was 16. When I got my driver's license, my sister when she gave me a present, she gave me a quarter. And I know that sounds like, what's cheap, right? No, she gave me a quarter because she's like,
Yeah.
Jason, she's like, listen, I've been there in your shoes. You're 16. You're going to have fun. Sometime you might find yourself in a situation when you need to call. And here's a quarter. And I will answer anytime you need to call. And I'm like, wow, this is when payphones, we still have payphones. And that meant so much to me that I held on to that quarter all those years. And when my sister got married, when I had my summer break in college, me and a couple of friends, I was like, guys, I'm driving down to Louisiana. Do you guys want to go? And like two of my buddies, like, yeah, hell yeah, we're going. Right. Because you could do anything at 18 down there at the time. So we drove down to Louisiana.
Yeah.
And I missed my sister so much. And I was so glad to see her, just make sure she was okay and all this. Because, little brother, I was always still like protective as hell. I just want to make sure she's okay. So I get down there. And the day that I'm leaving, I said I had a gift for her. And I think I'd given her the soundtrack to Stand By Me, the movie, because that was sort of our movie. And every time I'd hear that song, I think of my sister. And same today, when she hears it, she calls me or records it and like plays it and sends me a text. I had that quarter, same quarter, I gave back to her, and I said, now you're a long way from me. So if you ever need to call, I'll be here. And that girl busted out crying.
Nice.
But that's a little personal thing, but that was one of the more memorable moments of my life. And but yeah, and it was all because of this movie. And was it a great film? It did okay at the box office too, but it was in the shadow of a lot of great films written by Stephen King. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's why I called it underrated, because, when you name off Stephen King movies, yeah, you might end up getting to Stand By Me, but it's usually not the top picks that come out. A lot of his horror stuff comes out.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of people forget that Shawshank Redemption was Stephen King. So
I would have tossed that on one of my. I would have. I was going to toss Shawshank on the 90's thing, but there's no way that movie was underrated, man. That
no. Yeah. No, I will go on record say that's probably my go-to movie when I need to be entertained. That is my go-to movie, Shawshank. So
there's here's a comedy. We talked about Top Gun, and the guy who played Iceman was Val Kilmer. And I'm glad he's still around. I did a little tribute to Val Kilmer in one of the past Gonzos. It's like, I'm getting tired of like celebrating people when they die. Let's talk about this guy. And but he was in this movie, funny as hell, called Real Genius. Do you remember this?
I do.
I thought that was incredibly underrated.
Yeah.
But it's one of those guilty pleasure movies. Anytime it's on TV, and I own it, but it's like anytime it's on TV on some channel on Pluto or something, I'm going to stop and watch. I can't not stop and watch this movie.
Yeah. No, that was a great film. And I do love that it was a different character for him than like Top Gun would be. Because I like actors that just show a wide range of acting and not just get put into that same like hero role, or to me, an actor is someone that can expand beyond, like Robin Williams. Robin Williams could do any genre and do it well.
Yeah.
So like to me, that's what a good actor is. And I was glad to see Val Kilmer was able to do something more lighthearted, but yet still had a like kind of an undertone of seriousness to it too.
Yeah. Fun, just a fun movie. Just like
Yeah,
it's like one of those from the
excellent.
'80s, like Up the Creek or something that was really funny. Some of those guys that did National Lampoons that just
Yeah,
didn't really didn't get the movie draw, later on.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Here's one for you, Rob. I know you're going to appreciate this one. We had Michael J. Fox. We've been talking a lot about. Do you
yeah.
remember the movie Light of Day with Joan Jett?
Yes, I love that movie.
That is a hard movie to find,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Here's a funny thing. It's actually on not my top. I wrote a top 10, but it was one of the ones that just missed my top 10. So
how is this movie not wildly popular today? Like even a cult classic, it's just so hard to find. But it was such a great movie.
yeah, and Joan Jett surprised me by her acting. She was very convincing as like the bad girl, and I mean she does that, like she has the bad girl image in the music industry, obviously, but to be one in real life and to try to portray it on a screen in front of like millions of people is a little bit different. And you know, I think it helped her that she was kind of the bad girl in music, but her acting ability was very good.
Yeah, surprisingly so. She was actually in some of the Highlander the series, the TV series. She was in a few of those. I don't know if anybody knew that,
Yeah,
but
well,
yeah,
I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know that. I
she was one
wasn't
of.
big into. Yeah, I usually watch comedies mostly for TV. So
So what else do you have on your list, Rob?
here's another one. Everybody talks about like medieval movies like Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer. To me, the Beastmaster is one of
Oh,
my favorites.
when I was a kid,
Mark
that was
Singer,
great.
yeah, Mark Singer was so terrific in that, and TV Man was in there too. John Amos from Good Times
Really?
was the bodyguard. Yeah, he was the bodyguard for the
Oh,
young kid that remember.
yeah, that's right. I
Yeah,
do. I like. Yeah, you have to
yeah,
jar my memory. Yeah.
that was John Amos. So, um, but it was a great medieval movie, and I have another medieval movie on my list too. But um, that movie I thought was better than the Conan series because a lot of people don't realize Beastmaster actually had three movies. A lot of
Yeah.
people don't realize that.
Yeah.
Like Beastmaster, I could have put Beastmaster 2 on my list too, but I'm gonna go with the King of all Beastmaster, the original. Uh, Very entertaining, very action packed, like from start to finish. Scary characters. I mean, it had a little mix of horror in there too, with some of those like the warriors. They were all like tainted, kind of in blood, and so it to me, I used to like watch this movie and the next movie I'm going to mention like repeatedly for all like years,
Yeah. You
and
said
sometimes I'll
another.
still try to. Yeah, my other one I was going to mention is Dragon Slayer.
Oh
To
man, I
me,
forgot that.
yeah, to me, Dragon Slayer to this day, I will go on record, the best dragon in any movie I've ever seen. Top notch. And then you throw in Peter McNichol was terrific in this, and Sir Ralph Richardson, very senior actor at that time, was dynamic. So like when I think of medieval movies, yeah, I'll watch Conan and Conan the Destroyer, but I always go back to these two movies because this was my early childhood. Because Dragon Slayer, I believe, came out in 80 or 81. So I was like just getting into my double digits, like 11 years old. I lived for these movies. I lived for like any kind of adventurous things. And that's why Indiana Jones was Raiders of the Lost Ark was my first movie because I was into that action stuff. This was way before I became super horror fan. So like I grew up with all this stuff, and To me, I'll still watch Dragon Slayer, and I still get shocked on how great this dragon is. I mean, like if you haven't seen it in a while, people out there, revisit it. And when that scene when you get introduced to the dragon, your mouth will fucking drop. And can I say effing?
I don't care. I don't
Okay.
believe it. I don't
No,
believe it's
it
50-50,
will
Rob.
drop to the it will drop into the ground. I guarantee. If I'm wrong, message me at Father Mahoney because I will take your criticism and I will accept it, but I guarantee you'll come back and say, "Oh my God, that is the best dragon ever."
I'll get into a couple of my two or three of my biggest, most underrated of the '80s. But one I want to bring up real quick, and we don't need to talk about it, but like River Phoenix was in not River Phoenix, but what's his name? The Matrix guy, Keanu Reeves, was in a movie called River's Edge.
Keanu Reeves.
And so if you haven't seen River's
Yes.
Edge, worth taking a look at. I know it was one of those that's just kind of hard to find. You never hear about it, but River's Edge is a great movie. Do you remember Tom Cruise in the movie Legend?
Yes.
That to me is one of the most underrated films of the entire decade. Fairy tale kind of
I
thing.
mean, everything Tom Cruise touched back then was gold, though. Like, I mean, he still has that touch, like with Top Gun Maverick, yeah. But like everything in the '80s and even early '90s that Tom Cruise touched was gold. Very underrated actor, if you want to say that too, because
Yeah,
you remember. I'll get into another my Tom Cruise pick later, but there's another movie I'm going to mention that his acting got so overshadowed because of someone else that people don't realize how great of a character this was. Like I said, we'll finish this movie first, but
yeah.
Tom Cruise had something about him that just drew people to him, and Legend was another one. Legend was another movie that, like, oh my God, like, how is this guy not winning awards right now?
Yeah, I mean it's a fairy tale kind of movie. He played Jack, like the I don't know, kind of like the Jungle Boy kind of guy, and the princess loved him, and then he led her to a unicorn. It was very dark. There's a lot of dark undertones in that movie,
Yeah, yeah,
despite it being more of a fairy tale kind of thing. But there's a couple others that probably two of my, and then I'll get into my last one in a bit. But like Body Double was good, but do you remember? And then Black Rain, that was also another one of my underrated. But two that have to be near the
yes.
top of the list, They Live and Angel Heart.
Well, before you start, I have They Live on my list too.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
What do you think of
but go
Angel?
ahead, go ahead and
What
get that.
what do you
Angel
think
Heart.
of Angel?
I've only seen Angel Heart a couple times. I know it has De Niro in it, and it has the girl from the Cosbys.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, but I don't have much recollection of it. I know that there's some steamy parts in that, and I know there's some great performances
there's
by
some.
both of them, but
Yeah,
I
there's
don't
some.
really remember much about
Well, let me jar everybody's memory on this movie, and I know this is a lot of people haven't seen this. Is Mickey Rourke was the star of this, and he's
it.
a
Yeah,
war hero from World War II. He's living in Brooklyn. He's a private investigator, and this guy by the name of Louis Cipher comes to him with his attorney, and they're looking for a guy by the name of Johnny Favorite because Johnny Favorite still owes a debt to this Louis Cipher, which is Robert De Niro's character. Robert De Niro plays the devil.
yeah,
And basically this guy Johnny Favorite sold his soul to the devil, and he's hiring Mickey Rourke's character to go track this guy down. So he tracks him to upstate New York, where he was in a hospital. Apparently, had his facial reconstruction done before all this was popular. It got really big. And then and he would run a lot in the blues circles, like in the blues music circles and jazz.
yeah,
So he follows him down to New Orleans, tracks him down to that area where he meets I forgot her name, but it was what's her name from the Cosby Show, like the
yeah.
oldest, right? So she went on to that show, a different world, right? So she was in that.
Lisa
Lenny
Bonet.
Kravitz, Lisa Bonet, Lenny Kravitz's
Yeah.
wife. I can remember that part. Remember her name. But anyway, in the discovery of trying to find out who Johnny Favorite is, he has a lot of lost memory. And of
Yeah.
course, Mickey Rourke's character, he comes to find out he is Johnny Favorite. And the devil has come to collect. The devil's come for his due. He couldn't take his soul until he realized who he was.
Yeah.
And he does this horrific crime at the end. He doesn't realize how violent and evil he really is. And anyway, just underrated movie, such dark undertones. And if you really want to get twisted and macabre, you go to New Orleans at any decade.
Yeah.
Right. So that to me, like anytime that movie is on, I'm going to stop and watch it because the acting was superb. And despite having Robert De Niro in it, Mickey Rourke, who were huge in the 80's, and Lisa Bonet,
Yeah.
that thing went so far under the radar at the box office. It was one of these that went out, didn't do well, went straight to VHS.
Yeah.
Great film, highly underrated. One of the most underrated of the entire decade.
Yeah, I agree. So I have a pick that might shock some people because they're going to say, no, that's not underrated. I think it is. Because not only is it a great horror movie, but it's a very underappreciated horror movie. And only because of like all these franchises that try to rule everything, Friday the 13th and Halloween. And I'm not dissing on this. I love them. But to me, An American Werewolf in London is the best, most underrated horror movie in history. Very underrated.
Well because,
I mean, that transformation scene to just like the Dragon and Dragon Slayer, that transformation scene for the werewolf, top notch, and it's all practical effects.
Yeah, that was so much more raw with those effects too. Yeah, CGI can't even come close to making that look the way that did.
No, this looks like you're feeling his pain every time, like his body like twitches, and like when the chin comes out, you're feeling his pain because of his performance.
Oh yeah,
and it's to me that will never be duplicated again. And it shows how much influence Thriller had, because Thriller had a transformation scene.
Yes.
And a lot of people forget how good that transformation scene, and it's the same director. So John Landis.
And the special effects guy, that wasn't Tom Savini, was it?
No, it was Rick Baker.
Okay, because you were watching.
Yeah, he was a creature.
Yeah, you're watching a master of his craft. No matter what decade that guy, people have tried to recreate that, and they have never recreated it since. And they've
never come close to recreating it.
Not even in the ballpark, man. Not even on the same field. That just goes to tell you how like important that movie was in the development, not just horror films, but special effects. A lot of people came along and wanted to be that guy. Tom Savini might have been one of them, and he's great. He's amazing at what he does. But that was
I might butcher this line. I might butcher this line, but it also has one of my favorite like scenes, funny scenes, and when David Norton's character is naked in the zoo, and he calls the little kid over. He's like, "Mom, a naked American stole my balloons." Naked man. I laugh every time, and you're not supposed to laugh at this movie. It's supposed to be horrific. Like someone said, "Oh, with cancel culture today, he wouldn't be able to do that." And I'm like, "Screw cancel culture! Like it's funny."
Yeah,
you can't like
culture. Cancel culture is like nothing but cultural communism, man. That stuff can suck my wang. And but you said you had before I get into the They Live, Night of the Living Dead was also, as far as you want to go into horror, that was so campy and funny at the same time that I think that sort of was a little underrated in the horror genre back then.
Yeah, it is. You're talking about the 90's one, right?
Yeah. Oh, the 90's one. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, no, you're right. And one of the few times I actually could say that I enjoyed a remake as much as the original. I didn't say it was better, but I still enjoyed it because if anybody knows me out there, because I've been on the show a few times, I'm not one of those guys that likes remakes. There's a
They
few
all suck.
exceptions here and there. Yeah, few exceptions here and there, but Night of the Living Dead, the 1990 version, was very entertaining.
Hey, jump into
So,
They Live because that had Rowdy
okay.
Roddy Piper.
Well, yeah, I mean, anybody knows both of us, we're wrestling fanatics. So when I heard that Piper was going to do a movie, and since then he's done a lot of movies, but this was my first experience seeing him at the theater. And that movie is so much fun. But it gets you thinking. There's a little undertone there about like subliminal messaging, and that's something that's still kind of relevant today. They put these signs on billboards, saying they try to get you to like, what if there really is something in our minds that are controlling us?
Well,
And so maybe we're not robots per se, but we're robots in another way. We're feeding to the system,
yeah.
and I think that's what is relevant to me today about this movie is because it does have that, like when you wear the glasses, you see conform, you see like all the things that we're being controlled by. So it gets me thinking sometimes this movie was way ahead of its time.
Very much. Yeah, it's almost like we're all wearing rose-colored glasses, and when you take them off, you see the world for what it is. You don't necessarily like what you see, and that because
Yeah.
he puts the glasses on and looks at a billboard, it says "Obey, consume."
Yeah.
All these things. And when you think about it, with not just subliminal, I mean, we all know that there's subliminal messaging, but subliminal advertising. If you look at what Google does today, how many times you went to your Facebook page and something you were thinking about or mentioned to somebody else earlier suddenly shows up as an ad somewhere on your
Yeah.
social media? It's almost like they're reading your mind and
Yeah. It's like
rolling
it's like
where they lead
they're
you.
trying to feed into your curiosity now.
Yeah.
Because you
So
will just researching something on Google, and they transform it to other mediums, and like they throw it in your face now. Like this, hey, we know you're looking. We know you're looking. It's it's scary in a way.
yeah,
It really
it
is
is.
scary.
So I think he was onto a lot of that stuff. That movie was onto a lot of that we see today that's really playing out because that bothers me, the advertising. It's not like we have a choice. It's like we're being led. It's like they know what we're thinking before we think. When you type in
Yeah.
something on Google, it pre-fills out what you're looking for. It's like, oh yeah, and you just hit enter when you're halfway through typing. I'm not comfortable
Yeah.
with that in our culture and
Yeah.
with our technology. But they use it because we're consumers, and that's all we are to these systems, so to speak. Yeah.
And it might actually have one of my best fight scenes ever too. That fight scene between him and his buddy was epic.
That's better than most
You don't
wrestling
usually
matches
see.
I've ever seen.
Yeah, you don't normally see long fights in movies because they're like, oh, it takes up too much out of the plot. No, it was perfect timing for that scene. So, what else was I mentioned something about. Uh, hold on, let me look at my list. Go ahead, keep talking until I can find it.
Well, I was gonna bring up the last thing, the last movie that I had on my list, and before we jump into the '90s, was do you remember John Ritter from Three's Company?
Yes.
He was in a movie that one of the funniest comedies of the '80s. Came out in 1989. It's called Skin Deep. Now he was never a stand-up comedian, but his
Oh,
physical comedy is absolutely hilarious. And most people I talk to have not heard of this movie. And it was absolutely just to me one of the best movies of the '90s. If you like comedy, go watch Skin Deep with John Ritter.
yeah. I like I've only seen that movie maybe a handful of times, maybe three or four, but I remember that movie was really good. John Ritter was such an underrated actor, though, too. Everybody always, oh, Three's Company. Like, he did more than just Three's Company. Like, give the man his due.
Yeah, yeah, it was. What else do you have in the 80s? We'll jump into the 90s.
Well, actually, I just did a list of like a combination. So like most of mine are actually 80s,
Okay.
but I think this one might be on the cusp of 80, 89 or 90. You can look it up if you want. The Burbs
Oh, great film. One of
with
my favorites.
yes,
Tom Hanks.
yes, Tom Hanks when he was still kind of in his zany era before like he started doing a lot of serious acting. But this movie, like he was very amazing in, and I actually really enjoyed Corey Feldman's character a lot too. And like I was that kid that like when something was going cool on my block, I was proud to be there. Like so, like I could totally relate to his character in this movie. And it, a lot of people call it a comedy, but to me, it's almost like has a little dark horror in there too. You know, the evil next door neighbors are
Oh,
they really sadistic? Are they really
the
and in
clove
the,
necks burying bodies in the backyard.
yes. And that movie had me convinced through the whole thing that they were actually good people being misjudged. That ending, when it's finally revealed, sorry for the spoilers, anybody listening, but I was totally shocked. Like, holy shit, they were right all along.
Yeah, I swear to God, I like Carrie Fisher was in that movie too. Star Wars Princess Leia. She
Yeah,
was Tom Hanks'
yeah,
wife. I swear to God, I feel sorry for the
yeah,
woman that ever marries me because I'm like Tom Hanks in that movie. Every time somebody goes
yeah,
by, I'm like, oh, I wonder who that is. Where they're, I'm like that guy in my neighborhood.
yeah,
I
yeah.
am
And
like
we've
one thing
all
in
had,
neighborhood watch.
but the thing is, we all could relate to this neighborhood too, because if you ever lived in the burbs, and yes, the burbs is a real term, um, then you always were suspicious of the new people. Always. Like, I wonder what they're like. I wonder if they're good people. So we all could like relate to this movie if you grew up in the burbs, because to people in the burbs they feared change. Everything had to be the same every day. So whenever a new person moved in, it kind of shook the neighborhood a little bit. We're all watching you like this neighborhood, they were all watching the Klofex. So like I totally related to this movie growing up because that was me and my family, and a lot of my neighbors would have done the same. You know, like kind of
Oh yeah,
suspicious of the new family.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
hey, Rob, before we jump into the '90s, I'll roll through my top 10. You got some there too, and I know we might have a couple that are on the same, a couple of the same movies. I want to do a quick pause. The audience will not know this, but I'm going to pause real quick on the recording. All right, Rob. So let's jump to the '90s. Let's talk a little bit
Okay.
about this crazy movie by Stanley Kubrick called Eyes Wide Shut. Do you remember this one?
I've I've seen it, but it's been a while. It's Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, right?
Absolutely. They got booked for this
Yeah.
movie because Stanley Kubrick insisted on having a real life married couple play the role of this married couple. Ironically, their marriage was coming to an end, and all of I guess they channeled all their aggression toward each other out in this role. How they sort of split
Yeah.
up and broke up, and Kubrick was notorious for like he did The Shining, and was it 2001, right? So he did that. So he was
Yeah.
notorious for these kinds of movies. But there's so much subliminal stuff in that. If nobody has seen that, or if you've seen it, and you want to go do a YouTube search for like hidden meanings in Eyes Wide Shut. Oh my God, you'll find tons of videos. Crazy stuff. But to have two megastars,
Yeah.
this did very subpar at the box office. You have to
Yeah.
wonder why.
I remember I didn't do that great.
Um, because I didn't go see it. Did you?
No, I didn't see it. I didn't see it till it came out on video.
Uh, yeah, and then it was years after that. Like I probably didn't see it till the mid 2000s, and it came out in '99. So it was probably like 6, 7 years after it even came out before I even got around
Yeah.
to watching this thing. But underrated for sure. Excellent film with a lot of like really dark some seriously dark undertones, especially if you're a conspiracy theory fan. Worth
Yeah.
checking out. Very much worth checking out.
And then I know my nephew was a big fan of this movie when it came out. Like he bought the video and he would watch it at least like twice a week. So
Well, there was some nudity in there. Maybe that's why. So who knows?
probably. I mean,
Nicole
yeah,
Kidman, she was looking quite nice back then.
yeah,
There were
and
a lot of really.
we
Oh, go ahead.
no, we talked about this on my show. Nicole Kidman being in Dead Calm. Like I knew right when I saw this movie that she was going to be like one to deal with because she was a terrific in that movie.
Oh yeah,
And a lot. And talk about underrated movies. There's another one with Billy Zane, but Nicole Kidman. This I believe it might have been her first or second role, and you could definitely see how good her performances were, how her body movements were. She could really make you believe that she was scared at all times in that movie. But with Eyes Wide Shut, a little bit like a different movie, she's like another one, kind of like Robin Williams I mentioned earlier, who can play a lot of different kind of roles and get you convinced of that character.
yeah. We could do a whole show on Robin Williams because man, that guy. There isn't enough that you can say to appreciate that guy for what he brought to film and entertainment in people's lives from like through 3-4 decades.
Yeah,
And then all the while struggling with all the stuff he was struggling with that nobody knew that he held inside. But
yeah.
so I guess as far as I guess this is kind of a off the cuff question here for you, Rob, and I'll just ask this. The '80s when it transitioned into the '90s, music changed. We've talked about that, how it went
Yeah.
from a lot of like pop rock and glam metal to, and even some of the darker, harder metal, but like metal took a darker tone. Then it like morphed into like rap metal and new metal and
Yeah.
grunge, and just like the musical landscape took a little bit more. Even though the fun music and pop music was there, it was still there was a different feel and a different vibe to that whole decade. And
Yeah.
I'll just throw that out there. How did that translate into the movies?
I think it I think to me it affected the funness of the movies because once the '90s hit, a lot of things were starting to get taken more seriously, and um, the fun movies of the '80s they kept saying they wanted to translate that to more like where kids can be helped in the movie instead of showing them how to have fun and party. So to me, it took a more serious tone, and I didn't find '90s comedies as enjoying as the '80s because they were trying to make it more serious and educate kids more than let them just be kids, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, in a way it does because yeah, the ones who did try to go back and recapture that old vibe, like American Pie, was a huge success, and it sort of
Yeah,
went back and sort of captured that sort of party, have fun, the world be damned kind of attitude.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
To me American Pie is more of the newer version of Porky's. Because Porky's was all out raunchiness, having fun, having a good time, not caring about like what's going to happen after your high school.
yeah,
It's typical high school hijinks, and
you
to
know,
me, American Pie actually did finally recreate that. It was one of the movies that
yeah.
did break through and did take a more comical tone to it.
What it reminded me of a little bit was Fast Times at Ridgemont High meets Animal House, like the National
Yes,
Lampoons kind of movies. Um, and and no, I'm not saying that American Pie was underrated. It was absolutely not. That was a big hit.
yeah.
Um,
Yes,
but you're right when it comes to other things that were supposedly comedies. I know that. Well, yeah, I mean, you had some funny things like Big Daddy, anything that some of the Saturday Night Live guys were in
yeah,
were okay, but they were different too. Like they were sort of different too. Like even when you look at Wayne's World, which is a huge hit in the '90s, Wayne and
yeah.
Garth were sort of a little bit grunge when you think about it. And
Yeah.
there was which I think is probably one of the biggest underrated movies in the entire decade, came out in 92, Singles. Uh, and that was a great film. But remember that movie Reality Bites? I think that came out in like 91, 92, 93, right around
I
through
think
there.
it was 91.
Um, it
Yeah.
had Winona Ryder for Beetlejuice, which she was big in the 80's. And but
Yeah.
when you see movies like that, you see a different. I guess it's so weird. Like when I graduated in 92, I lived through the 80's and went to every hair metal concert that there was out there and enjoyed like everything. And then when the 90's came around, I went to college and it was like I went into a new era too. So I kind of like straddled both of those. And it was, I don't say it
Yeah.
was weird, but in a way, culturally, it was weird. And that's, I mean, the movies had a kind of a different cultural impact in the 90's.
And I think, you talk about the biggest transformation from the 80's to the 90's was a lot of the Brat Pack wasn't involved now in the 90's. You never really saw Molly Ringwald, maybe here or there, but like she never had a major role in the 90's. Anthony Michael Hall was sort of still in the mix a little bit, but once again, he wasn't as funny as he was in the 80's. So to me, like I used to adore anything with the Brat Pack, anything.
Yeah.
Like no matter which actor it was. But there was one actor. I think that it was either a late '80's movie or an early '90's movie that I find very underrated. Was John Cryer in Hiding Out?
Yeah. I totally forgot about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Remember, he was like he had evidence against someone. He had to hide in a high school, and like he's not. He was like 30 years old, and then
Yeah.
like someone like one of the high school girls started falling in love with him, and he's like in that like weird position, like because he's now like the old man, because like he's a 30-something-year-old in a high school. I
Yeah.
thought that movie was very entertaining.
It really was.
Yeah,
It's like our Gen Xers sort of grew up and kind of like they lived. They took the rose-colored glasses off and saw the world as it sort of was. And some of the roles that they
yeah,
took were a little darker, a little meaner. You know, I mean, because
yeah, yeah,
when you talk about our Brat Pack, I mean, when you look at Keanu or not Keanu, but let's just face Billy the Kid, right? I mean, he went into some darker
yeah.
roles.
Emilio Estevez.
Emilio Estevez and Charlie Sheen too.
Yeah,
Even though he took some fun roles, but
yeah,
Charlie Sheen did some darker roles in the 80's with like the Vietnam stuff and after his dad did
yeah,
the Apocalypse Now. But it's like they started taking some very different roles, and you started to see the world in a little different light through their eyes. And then the younger generation that came up that the little older, not a little younger than us, but saw some of the same things and transitioned in. They were seeing people in the early our heroes sort of taking those dark roles, and they took it a little darker in the later 90's, I think, when it comes to film.
yeah.
But
And there's another movie, I believe it was might have been before the 80's, but Michael J. Fox did a war movie called Casualties of War, and
yeah,
I find this a very underrated as far as a war movie goes because it's not as brutal as something like maybe Platoon or those other Vietnam movies, but this was it showed that Michael J. Fox had a range because everybody knew him obviously as Marty McFly and Alex P. Keaton and all
Teen
the
Wolf.
fun
Yeah,
secret of my success. Like, but this was his first really big crack at something serious, and man, does he pull it off! And a great another Brat Pack, Sean Penn was his commanding officer, and to me this was Sean Penn's best performance. I don't care what anyone says. Sean Penn showed that he could be like a mean son of a bitch, and this guy he portrays is one mean like don't fuck with me. I'm in charge out here. Anything can happen to you, and no one will know.
yeah.
So if anybody hasn't seen that movie or seen it in a while, revisit it and then tell me what you think because that movie like had me on the edge of my seat that whole movie.
There was I'll bring up a couple more here. I've got a list, and I'll like read them off so people can check them out if they want to know what's on the list. Or actually, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to read them all off. I'm going to put them on my Substack. That's a teaser.
Yeah.
Get your ass over to my Substack and subscribe. And I'm going to list them all from the 90s as well as the 80s. I'll do two different ones. I'll put the link to our podcast in here. And Rob, if you want to put a link to your show, send me a link to your show, your Rumble page. I'll throw that in there too. But there was a couple that
our show.
Oh yeah, I'm co-hosting it now. I'm sorry, man. I'm co-hosting. But Strange Days. Do you remember Strange Days?
Vaguely.
Um,
Once it started hitting like the early to mid 90s, I kind of phased out of movies a lot. Like I would check out a lot of horror movies more because I think horror movies kind of kept that momentum going from the 80s. Like it just became different horror, but it was still entertaining. So like if it wasn't really horror based, I probably didn't watch it or at that time or until like much later.
Yeah. Well, I'll give everybody kind of a little overview of this. Strange Days is definitely worth checking out. It had Juliette Lewis in it. And
okay, that already convinced me right there.
All right. So she had broken up with her boyfriend, but it got involved with somebody else. Essentially, what this is the futuristic movie. Like it takes place in 1999, right at the turn of the century, even though it's filmed in 95. And people had these things they would put on their head. And like let's just say you put something on this little device on your head, Rob, and you start going out and murdering people. And if let's just say that you're the kind of guy who that's your new drug, it's like I'm not going to go out and kill you, but I want to know what it feels like to kill somebody. Well, you could buy this snuff device sort of thing, this upload, kind of like Johnny Mnemonic. But it was an upload into this device. You could put this on and it would impact your brain waves, and you would see exactly what that guy saw through his eyes as you go about doing this.
Wow.
And it would impact all of your like endorphins and your adrenaline and all this stuff. You're there doing it. And then like it's like blows your mind. You throw this thing off your head. Or if you're having sex with a beautiful woman or skydiving, whatever, all this stuff is available. But it's not legal.
Yeah.
So technology's there, but they catch a murder where they execute a very controversial rapper. These police do, and they try to hide it, and they're trying to get this to this one guy. It turns out his best friend was behind a lot of this stuff too. But it was such how things are going to impact the culture, but the technology impacts the culture too. It was a very dark story of like this guy trying to survive the night on New Year's Eve without getting himself killed.
Yeah.
And knowing he has this, these people are after his ass now. And one other lady helping him, his bodyguard, the so-called bodyguard. It was a great film. There are a lot of underlying themes, I think, because again, it was one of those heavy 90s films that you were not going to get out of there without really good cultural themes. It wasn't preachy. It wasn't like, woke shit, but it was really a good caliber film. And that was one of my top underrated films of the 90s.
Well, for me, a lot of people may not say this is underrated because it did have a big budget. It did have a big director. But I think it kind of flew under the radar was Natural Born Killers.
Yeah.
To me, I love. I'm a huge Woody Harrelson fan, anyways. But like, not even I could prepare for how good Woody Harrelson was in this movie. And you brought up Juliette Lewis. That's funny that you brought her up because Juliette Lewis is one of my favorite actresses, and like everything from when she was younger. Even some of her newer stuff. I mean, she can't go wrong with me. So, like when you mentioned that she was in Strange Days, I'm like, okay, I'm there. But yeah, Woody Harrelson was great. Then Robert Downey Jr. We talked about him. This was kind of like a little bit of his comeback, because he hadn't done really much in the '90s up until that point. So he was so. What's that old talk show that used to Geraldo Rivera? He was so Geraldo Rivera like. It was amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Like and it talks about something that's still relevant today. How much the media loves like murder
Violence,
and
anything at all.
yeah, yeah, anything that can get ratings is for the media.
Yeah.
And I think like this movie was so ahead of its time as far as that goes, because nobody was saying anything back. We all knew it. We all knew the media was influencing people, but no one would say it. Well,
Yeah.
here comes this movie along that puts it right in your face. We love murder, and I mean, to me, that was the best part, is exposing the media for what they are and what they've always
Yeah.
been. So
Take a look at your top rated
this movie,
shows. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah.
I
No,
was
I
just
was just
saying.
gonna say, like, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just saying some of your top rated shows these days. Dateline 2020. People watch that investigative Discovery Channel all the time. What are they looking for? Murder mysteries all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And here they were in this movie, putting Mickey and Mallory on a pedestal. That this was like their main story. Let's find out everything we can about them. And they were almost sensationalizing murder.
Yeah.
Like, remember the one interview in the crowd where like they're going, "What do you think about Mickey and Mallory?" And they're like, "Oh, we want to be just like them." It's like you're going out there using kids' vulnerabilities against them, trying to say they want to kill people for a living. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And yeah, this movie, and it had great action. Yeah, there was some parts that were like kind of trippy, and you had to kind of like figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
But the performances by Juliette Lewis and Woody Harrelson and Robert De Niro, and
Let's
there's
not
other
forget.
great people in this movie.
Let's not
Yeah.
forget Rodney Dangerfield as the
Yes.
father.
Who would ever thought in a million years you would have a pedophile Rodney Dangerfield, like abusive husband? I mean, he pulled off that role. Like, he was scary in that role.
I know, and to me, Rodney Dangerfield, it's the funniest man I think I've ever seen in my life.
Yes,
Hilarious.
yes,
And when I saw that
and
role,
yes,
that movie makes me nervous to this day.
yeah. And even when he's talking like kind of funny, it has like a darkness to it. Like
Yeah.
they portray like they're like on like a show like the Cosby Show, because they have the people cheering in the background, and you, you get that dark feeling because of that they're sensationalizing television shows too, in a way.
Yeah, I mean
So
every
it's
show that you watch is a murder mystery or something. And it's that show, like I said, still makes me nervous to this day. And that one scene where he rationalizes murder as the only natural, pure thing, that to
yeah,
me was one of the most dangerous scenes in all of Hollywood.
yes,
Dangerous culturally. And
that whole interview was pushed towards murder is good.
and it, you
And
know,
and that delivery that Woody Harrelson, like that scene that you just talked about, I had chills when when they let's cut to a break, and I'm sitting there, I have goosebumps the size of mountains, because I was like, that what he just said is probably what every serial killer in the world is thinking.
and the media loved it. That's the sad
Yes.
thing. They're just as bad as the guy who did it. And and I know this might be a
Yeah.
little I'm going to say something way controversial, and I don't know this to be a fact, but I've seen Rob Zombie's movies, and if I had to wager a guess as to one movie that impacted him the most, other than like old 70s style stuff, it would have been that movie and that scene.
Yeah. I mean,
Because he takes murderers and makes them the good guys.
yeah. And there was like so many different scenes that like really scared me. Even like when refresh my memory, the guy who was in The Fugitive, who's the warden in this one, um, him telling Jack Scagnetti, the cop, like basically, we're gonna release him into your custody and just kill them.
Yeah, Tommy
And
Lee
like,
Jones.
yeah, Tommy Lee Jones, and then the cop was the guy who just passed recently, Tom Sizemore.
Yeah.
And that's another thing people forget about this movie, is how packed of a cast this is. And how it flew under the radar to a lot of people, I will never know. But anybody who wants a reality check on what the media really wants, watch this movie.
What? Yeah, you want to know why every time if it bleeds, it leads. You want to know why that's a true statement in media? Watch this movie. It is
Yeah.
absolutely disturbing.
Yes.
And
Very,
I'm
very
almost glad
disturbing.
it wasn't a cultural phenomenon, but elements of it probably should be.
Yeah.
But
And then I have one more I wanted to just mention real fast was we talked briefly earlier about Gleam in the Cube with Christian Slater, which is a
yeah,
total departure of the last film. But this was just one of those fun movies, a kid on a skateboard who, witnesses a murder, and it's it's really kind of a scary movie in that sense. A, a kid that is like kind of an outcast to people. He does have his little friends and everything, but he's one of those kids that always is in trouble. So of course the police don't believe him. So that was, in a way, that was me a little bit too, because I was kind of a troublemaker when I was younger. And if I was ever in that situation, I bet the cops were probably like, we can't listen to this kid. He doesn't know really what's going on. But to me, this was a really good mix of comedy meets like adventure and action. So anybody that hasn't seen this movie, Christian Slater is absolutely great in this movie. So check
you
it
know what?
out.
You know what movie I just saw within the last like 2 or 3 months that I'd never seen before
What?
was Heather. It had Christian Slater. Heather's. How
Yeah,
did I? How did
Heather's is a
that?
great movie.
How did that not hit my radar? Like that was a great movie. I can't believe I'd never seen it. But my
Yeah,
number
and
one rated.
that's a very dark comedy. Very dark
Oh
comedy.
yeah, and that was the thing about comedies in the '90s. They took a dark turn, took a very dark turn.
Yeah.
And again, Winona
Yeah,
Ryder
you
that
can't.
one too.
Yeah, Winona
So
Ryder
any
is so underrated as an actress.
Yeah, I know. So for any of you Stranger Things fans, and I know there are millions of them out there, and I love that show too. Go back and check her out in Beetlejuice. Go back and check her out in Heather's. Winona Ryder had
Yeah,
a lot of great films, and
yeah,
she was really good. She just got out of the business for a while, and I guess got the opportunity with Stranger Things to play a mom, which I think is probably strange for a lot of Gen Xers who partied their ass off in the '80s. And like, all right, these are the roles I'm getting now. I'm not used to that, right?
yeah.
But
Yeah, no.
my most underrated movie of the decade, Pump Up the Volume with Christian Slater. And for
Christian
those of
Slater's
you,
on a roll right now.
yeah, for those of you who haven't seen it, this is a kid whose dad is. They just moved to a new town. His dad is the high school principal. He starts a new school, and like he just notices like some weird things around the school. Like, why is this school so highly rated? They have so many problems here, and nobody really wants to acknowledge it.
Yeah,
Well, this kid is smart enough and like good enough with electronics. He's not wasting his time with video games. He's a pirate radio DJ, and now he gets so popular with the kids among the high school. They're starting to play his. They're recording his show and playing their tapes at school, and these tapes are going around. He's criticizing everybody in the school from the principal on down, and just like something's terribly wrong here. And it's such a fun movie, but it's at the same time it really hits some things I think we started to realize in the early '90s about, I don't know, just acceptance of people and who they are, and who, just it was a very like the odd man out kid, like that can't be
yeah,
accepted because he's shy and all these, and it was such a good movie. I think they're the most absolutely most underrated of the '90s. Um, just like I think maybe Skin Deep might be the most underrated of the '80s. This is one, if you haven't seen it, go get it. It was literally made. It was released in 1990, so sort of to me that was like the bridge in the gap
yeah.
as far as what the '90s movies of that decade turned out to be and what the '80s were. This was bridging the gap, and the soundtrack was badass.
Yeah. For me, Natural Born Killers was my number one for the 90s, but I still have two more I didn't talk about for the 80s.
I'll
And
toss them
my
out
top
there.
two, my top two. Well, number two would be, and a lot of people are gonna scream that is not underrated. It was overrated for years until people finally like caught up with it. The Thing, John Carpenter. You know,
Yeah,
when people thought about John Carpenter, it was always Halloween, 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 Halloween. But man, does fucking The Thing, it terrifies you, this movie. It absolutely terrifies you because it puts you in that situation of who can I trust? Who's the one that's the bad guy here? Because it convinces you that everyone is, and then finally when you find out who it is, you're totally blown away. But it keeps you in that bear hug of like, can we trust this guy? Can we trust this guy? And it has such a, oh my God, like a terror atmosphere. Um, I think it's John Carpenter's best movie. Hate me all you want, Halloween fans. Hate me all you want, because John Carpenter literally scared the fucking shit out of me when I first saw The Thing.
I agree with you that I think it might have been John Carpenter's best. And
Yeah.
because when it comes to Halloween, it was doing the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
And not that they were not great, but that was different. To me, a true artist is somebody who can step outside of their comfort zone and do something else and do it really, really well. And I know it's
Yeah.
still the same genre, but it was sort of sci-fi-ish. So it was very different than the Halloween type stuff. And I thought it was an amazing movie. The remake, the actors were okay. I think the storytelling lacked. If you wanted to compare the remake to the original, go for the original.
Yeah.
It's without a question. Now, I'm not shitting on the remake, but why?
Yeah.
Because when you're trying to remake something like The Thing, you are not going to live up to that standard. Like, just there's some movies that should not be remade. And yeah,
my
that was
number one,
yeah.
my number one is The Color of Money with Tom Cruise and Paul Newman.
Well, how did
I thought this movie
forget
was,
that?
yeah.
Oh,
That's been one of my, since the day it was released. I saw that at the theater. I have loved that movie every year since. It doesn't, and I remember earlier I talked about how Tom Cruise sometimes gets overshadowed in performances. This is one of them, because Tom Cruise is probably the best I've ever seen him in this movie, because he has to go up against a heavyweight of Paul Newman. Paul Newman, for anyone who's a Paul Newman fan, knows this man can act.
Yeah, I know a lot of our audience here is Gen Xers, probably younger, maybe some little, but I don't think any older generation. But man, I tell you what, like if you haven't seen Paul Newman's movies, go stream them. No slack to Tom Cruise here, but like you don't. It'd be like going up against who's the guy who played the Godfather, or Sean Connery or somebody. There's some actors, Jack Nicholson. There's some that are just like above the fray.
Yeah,
and there's a reason why some do a lot of action movies, like Tom Cruise, great actor, still in those movies. But like when you go up against like a handful of these heavyweights, and he's one of them. Like he just Fast Eddie Felson, man.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody doesn't know the story of Fast Eddie Felson, you start with The Hustler.
Yeah, The Hustler, great film.
So, so of course that's not the era we're talking about right now, but this is kind of like the newer version of The Hustler. They say it's not considered a sequel, but I think it is, because it's Fast Eddie Felson now being the teacher of Tom Cruise. And we talked about how great Paul Newman is, but even Paul Newman was actually quoted saying, "This kid can act."
Yeah, and
referring to Tom Cruise, because to go against like what you talked about, the Sean Connerys and the Eastwoods, and you have to be on your A game. And Tom Cruise is really on his A game in this movie. He's over the top in some parts, but man, like I applaud him, and I think he should have got a best like supporting actor, or at
Yeah,
least some kind of award for this. And I think Paul Newman should have gotten an award too, because they both were fantastic. And it's just a simple story of a man taking another man under his wings, trying to win a tournament. But the scenes that they have together, I mean, top notch.
yeah.
So anybody who hasn't seen Color of Money, please stream it, look for it, and watch it. But watch The Hustler first.
I think you take the cake on that one, Rob, because that probably has to be. I would, yeah. Now that we talk, I totally forgot about that movie. But yeah, that's the winner of the night right there. The Color of Money. So
like that over the top scene I was mentioning was the scene when he gets a hold of the babuzela. I think that's the name of the pool stick, and he brings it to that place to kind of show off. And he's playing pool, dancing to Werewolves of London.
Oh,
that scene is priceless.
Warren Zevon, Werewolves of London, and that's the only time I've never heard of Warren Zevon until that movie, and then like, wow. Then I heard Lawyers, Guns, and Money, and like that movie, like again, soundtracks, and the way that you use it, that was a great song, a great soundtrack, great soundtrack, great movie. That's the winner.
Who played the girlfriend? I can't remember who played the girlfriend, but she was terrific too. She was a kind of a popular actress too.
Mary Antonio Masterson or something like that.
Yes. She was terrific in this too.
Oh yeah, she was. She played the strong, loving, but yet bitchy when she had to be girlfriend, like tough as nails. Like I'm your manager.
She knew what Paul Newman was doing to create like the superstar of a up and comer pool player, but like Tom Cruise's character was like so naive and like always fell for the bait. Like when the scene when like Paul Newman is like caressing her shoulders and everything, he's like, "Hey, old man, get your hands!" Like he was so oblivious to what they were doing that it's like, and then that was the scenes that she's like, "Dude, you just like fucked yourself out of a lot of money because of that." Like,
like he was trying to, Paul Newman was trying to teach him. And yet she was the student. She was the one learning, and she was the only one that could rein him in, rein Tom Cruise's character in. Yeah, that was really, really great movie, man. Good call. I didn't even think of that, but man, good call. Dig it, man, dig it. Hey, Rob, what's next on your show? How many shows you got left this year?
Probably one more show. I'm gonna get together with you and Poe, and talk about just doing a shorter episode, because right now, everybody's, getting ready for Christmas and doing shopping, and, like we all have jobs, and it's like, so I'm probably thinking about doing maybe like a maybe hour show talking about Silent Night, Deadly Night at some point. My favorite Christmas movie. I know everybody's always like, oh, well, we want to watch this and we want to watch all the lovey-dovey ones. I'm a horror guy, so like we already did our fun show with Back to the Future.
Yeah, there's no Hallmark movies on your channel, on your show, man. No, there's some the really important genre in the culture of America. I tell you what, but that's a fun show. So everybody, when you get a chance, go to Rumble or YouTube and look up, is it Father Mahoney's House of Horrors? Or what is it?
The channel you'll look for is Mahoney Massacre will be the channel name. And then if you go to the live area on YouTube, there's like videos, shorts, and then live. Go into live and look up for Father Mahoney's House of Horrors. And that's all the shows are listed there. If you go to playlist, I have a playlist of all the Father Mahoney shows since I've started on YouTube. So you can even revisit some older ones when I just did it by myself. Some older ones when I was with another network, and obviously the ones since I've been with Dognut Media. And I want to give a shout out to those guys too. The Dognut Media. We have our own different kinds of shows. We have conspiracy shows. We have backward horror shows where they talk about a lot of things like backward. And I don't think they'll mind me saying hillbilly-ish, because they're hillbillies through and through. So Then we have me and Cyrus's show, Father Mahoney's House of Horrors. We have, like I said, the Jack Transmission. We have the Near Do Wells, where Near Do Wells kind of talks about anything under the sun. It's a different topic every week, sometimes serious, sometimes things going on in the world. And then we have the Brew Crew, which is kind of a wrap-up show. The wrap-up show talks about all the other shows, plus they talk about a lot of political things going on in the world. So go to Dognut Media on Twitter. It's all one word, Dognut Media. Or you can just go to, what is it? Each of our channels. So I already mentioned the names, Backwards Horror, Father Mahoney's House of Horrors. I have my own Facebook page. And then they do well as they have their own page. So you can find all of our networks on YouTube somewhere. And that's one other thing about the Dognut Media. It's a little different from a typical headquarters, as you say, like Rabbit and Red would be, or like Skeleton Crew. All of our shows are independent, so they're not run by one person. Like each show has their own run of the show. So if you want to twist it up like me and Cyrus did and do comedy one week, no one's going to give you yes or no. It's our decision. So that's what makes us a little bit different from other networks.
Yeah, and thanks for inviting me on to co-host that. It's I don't always have a guest on this show, but it's fun when you have somebody to kind of bounce thoughts off of. It makes the show a little easier, probably a little more entertaining to the listeners too. So so certainly appreciate that. So folks, make sure you go there and subscribe to all those channels. And if you get a chance, go to cyrusalderwood.substack.com and subscribe to that son of a gun, because I update that. It's free, unless you want to get some of the locked articles. I've been doing a writer's prompt challenge for the last 20 weeks. Some of the stuff I've been writing, I've been putting up on there. Some of it, most of it's free. Some of it I've locked a little bit for the subscribers who pay. And other than that, man, just do me a solid. Go to Amazon.com, look up Cyrus Alderwood, find a book you like, and buy one. I'd consider it a freaking Christmas present. So, I don't always promote the books. I'm the worst. Honestly, Rob, I'm the worst promoter in the world. I've got some crazy fun books out there, and I have no idea how to market and promote. So it's all word of mouth. So you guys listening, some of you have gotten free books before from like these little free book challenges, and I think we gave a couple of free ones away on your show, Rob. And maybe we'll do that for Christmas. Let's do another one for Christmas. Let's give another book away for Christmas. I'll walk away at Gonzo or something, or something in the horror genre. I've got some. I've been in order, so I got some Dark Places and bedtime stories for the terminally afraid. Some of the wildest horror stuff. They're short stories, so they're fun. But anyway, everybody, thanks again for listening to Gonzo Chronicles. Appreciate you guys. Have a great Thanksgiving. I'll be back to run my mouth again a couple times more before Christmas. And Rob, if you're not drunk, or making some new invention in the porn industry, you're welcome back. We'll talk about some of the movies and music. And anyway, everybody, thanks again. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. We'll see you on down the road. Cheers.
Bye.